Shayla, come in. I'm alive. Trina, hey girl, hey. Oh, Shayla just sent me a message. Her phone must not have got a notification that I was live. Now, it literally came through probably 10 seconds ago. Alright, we live on both places now. I don't know, maybe there's a lag on your end, I don't know. Okay. People. Go ahead and bring up my screen here. Y'all, I'm operating on 3 hours of sleep. Oh, that's probably Shayla. Look, after I went live, I saw your come through. You must have sent me a message a few seconds after I went live. I was like, she must not have got the notification yet. So I'm not sure how much of a lag. I know some people say the notification don't come through and they just kind of come back and check at the time. But eyes here. Eyes is here. You know. 16, that's right. Okay. I didn't even know, excuse me, I didn't even know yesterday you had sent me a message, Bella. Bella was playing with my phone when I was going through my messages last night. I said, wait, Shayla sent me a message, but it looked like I had read it, but it was Bella on my phone. So if y'all send me a message and all the time it looked like I looked at it and I ignored you, it was probably Bella with my phone, clicking through my stuff, opening up every single app on my phone and scrolling like she know what she doing. So it was probably her. So forgive me and my late response. Okay, y'all. Auntie, hey girl, hey, shalom, shalom. Okay, I'm just adjusting these screens now so I can read everything. Okay. What's up, Uncle JB? All right, y'all. Let's move this back a little bit. Sorry. Hold on. Okay. All of y'all, peace and blessings. Hold on. What'd you say? Peace and blessings, sister. My nephews and them stayed up all night watching Doctor Strange. After hearing you speaking of it now, watch things with third eye open. I'm telling you, bro, they put so much truth in the movie. That's my favorite movie. When I first saw it, look, I first saw it, we was all upstairs in the room. It was like movie night in our bedroom. We watched it. My husband had passed out. He went to sleep. He said, I ain't hanging with y'all, and I'm going to sleep. Me and the kids watched it back to back twice, and I put it on the third time. By this time it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. I fell asleep on the third time. That's how good that movie was to me. I'm like, wait a minute, I gotta go back and watch it again. I'm sure I missed something the first time around. It was so good we put it on the third time. The kids watched it the third time. They be up all night sometimes. Yeah, once you understand some spiritual things or some supernatural things happening in the background or whatever, you will begin to notice it and how it's more than just you that has picked up on this, and people use this stuff and they put it in movies and most people never even pick up on it. Okay, so all right, y'all, happy Thursday. See here talking, didn't even write my notes down. Okay, it is March the 25th 2021, day 111 of year 3 of reading through the books of the law and the prophets. Another 3-year consecutive day count, day 780. It definitely does. Fix this back. Okay. All right, y'all. First, we are in 1 Samuel, picking back up with chapter 16 all the way to 18 today. Then we're going to hop on over to the Legends of the Jews and pick up where we left off yesterday on page 441. I think it's 441. Yeah, that's right, 441. Because yesterday I guessed at the number because I had put my stuff up. But it's 441 because we're starting with Jezebel. All right, y'all. So let's go ahead and do this today. We're a couple days away from Passover, you guys. Everybody ready? I ain't completely ready. I still got some more yeast products to get out of here. I need to get on it today. All right, y'all. So let's do the blessing, the Shema. The Shema, which is found in Deuteronomy chapter 6, starting at verse 3. Hear, therefore, O Israel, and observe to do it, that it may be well with you, and that you may increase mightily, as Yahuwah, the God of our fathers, has promised us, in a land that flows with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, Yahuwah, our God, He is one God, and you shall love Yahuwah your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be in your heart. And you shall teach them diligently unto your children, and they shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and you shall teach them diligently unto your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up, and you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them upon the posts of your house and on your gates. And Yahuwah commanded us to do all these statutes, to fear Yahuwah our God for our good always, that He might preserve us alive as it is at this day. And it shall be our righteousness if we observe to do these commandments before Yahuwah our God as He has commanded us. All right, y'all. Let's go ahead. Hop on over here to 1 Samuel. All right, y'all. Samuel anoints David as king. I think my chair is over. I'm all like half in the picture. Hold on. Okay. It's looking all kind of crooked. Alicia. Shayla here. Shayla was like, oh, she's talking about Doctor Strange. She's like, yes, me too. I definitely watched it twice. Like, what? Let me watch this again. Okay, y'all. Now, Yahuwah said to Samuel, you have mourned long enough for Saul. I have rejected him as king of Israel. So fill your flask with oil and go to Bethlehem. Find a man named Jesse who lives there, for I have selected one of his sons to be my king. But Samuel asked, how can I do that? If Saul hears about it, he will kill me. Take a heifer with you, Yahuwah replied, and say that you have come to make a sacrifice to Yahuwah. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you which one of his sons to anoint for me. So Samuel did as Yahuwah instructed. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town came trembling to meet him. What's wrong? They asked. Do you come in peace? Yes, Samuel replied. I have come to sacrifice to Yahuwah. Purify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice. Then Samuel performed the purification rite for Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice too. When they arrived, Samuel took one look at Eliab and thought, surely this is Yahuwah's anointed. But Yahuwah said to Samuel, don't judge by his appearance or height, for I have rejected him. Yahuwah doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but Yahuwah looks at the heart. Then Jesse told his son Abinadab to step forward and walk in front of Samuel. But Samuel said, this is not the one Yahuwah has chosen. Next, Jesse summoned Shemiah. And Samuel said, neither is this one Yahuwah has chosen. In the same way, all 7 of Jesse's sons were presented before Samuel. But Samuel said to Jesse, Yahuwah has not chosen any of these. Then Samuel asked, are these all the sons you have? Remember this from last week, right? So hopefully you remember as I start talking about it, you'll probably remember if you got. So remember how King David came about? Remember Jesse was a pious man, but Jesse, he was spending a little bit too much time down there where the slave woman was at, right? Remember? and his eye had caught wind of one of these beautiful maidens down there in the course of her daily work, and he had planned to go sleep with her, right? All his piousness, it couldn't keep him from going to carry out this thing, right? I'm sure he contemplated it for a while. But what happened was his wife got wind of what he was about to do. And what she do? She dressed herself up and passed herself off as this servant girl, right? So good. Passed herself off so good. I mean, covered herself in everything, right? Oh, Master Jesse, right? Look, so good. Then when Jesse got down there to do his thing with her, he didn't realize that he had just slept with his very own wife. Like, you went and committed adultery with your wife, right? Your wife kind of saved your butt a little bit. Well, I don't know that's the right word. In a way, it is. But in a way, his heart was bent on doing what was wrong. So in his mind, he thought he was committing adultery. His wife found out about it, and she was like, yeah, this ain't happening tonight, you know. Plus, she didn't want no outside children, right? Look, so what happened was, Jesse went down there and slept with the servant girl, and was completely dumb to the fact that he had slept with his wife. Now, we could tell, although he was a pious man, he wouldn't to, let me not say, let me just say, because I don't want to talk about Jesse like that. I guess he wasn't paying attention to how his wife's body felt, to where when you thought you was going into another woman, like, there should be something that alerts you, wait a minute, this is not my wife's body. Or maybe they were nice and petite, they was all petite, maybe they felt alike, I don't know. But he should have, Jesse had 7 sons. You mean to tell me, at least after 7 times of having intercourse with your wife, you don't know her body? Maybe not. Maybe he was just there for the pleasure and wasn't really paying attention to the lesson of the body. And he didn't know. He didn't know until Samuel came to reveal a secret, right? And normally that's how some of this stuff comes out. Even Jesse didn't know. Look, hold on. Before this, only his 7 sons, right? So we know between these 2 sentences here, he said, Yahuwah has not chosen any of these. Then Samuel asked, are these the sons you have? What's crazy is there's a break in the paragraph, right? And this sentence sits alone by itself. Then there's another break, and it continues to go on. But what happens is, between these 2 sentences and the legends of the Jews, it fills it in. After Samuel asks, are these all the sons you have? His wife jumps in and said, ooh, yeah, so you remember that night you thought you was cheating with the slave girl, right? Look, not only that, look, he slept with his wife, and she got pregnant with King David. So there was not really adultery, but there was adultery in Jesse's mind till this moment here, till Samuel showed up, right? And clearly they weren't in a habit, or maybe they hadn't had sex in the last, since she started showing. He like, whoa, woman, why is you pregnant? You know, so clearly from what we understand, they hadn't been sleeping together from the time his wife started showing, because he didn't know that his wife had given birth. And apparently, y'all, maybe you was away in town or something, or maybe she said she was gonna go visit her kinfolk and had the baby there. He was caught up in the moment. The mind is a terrible thing, ain't it? Doe. Uncle JB, you got to get this thing under control. Look, so what happened was, after she had the baby, they gave the baby to the servant girl that Jesse thought he had committed adultery with, right? And everybody kept the secret quiet. So when Yahuwah comes to blow up the scene, Samuel said, look, Jesse brought all his sons out there. He said, in the same way, all 7 of Jesse's sons were presented to Samuel. But Samuel said to Jesse, Yahuwah has not chosen any of these. Then Samuel asked, are these all the sons you have? And right there is where Legends of the Jews fills in that missing piece. And after his wife, look, this. And remember where King David was. King David was a shepherd, because the servant girl whom he lived with, whom he thought he was his mom up to this point, her husband was actually a shepherd, and he had flock. And so he had taught King David how to be a really good shepherd. So King David learned all this in the household of the servant girl and her husband. Of course, I don't know if she was already married or somewhere down the line she had got married, or what have you. Or maybe they was, whatever. Everybody was in cahoots. Everybody but Jesse, and everybody else knew, right? And so when all that came out, and it a whole couple paragraphs later, then they said, apparently, yes, there is still the youngest. Jesse replied, but he's out in the field watching the sheep and goats. Send for him at once, Samuel said. We will not sit down until he arrives, right? Oh, it also said that Yahuwah allowed it to happen because the training that King David needed to actually become king, he was not going to get in the house of Jesse and his real mama, right? So Yahuwah allowed this thing to come about in order to get King David, or David at the time, to the place where he needed him. He needed him to come from this good stock, but he needed him in training over here with this family, which is probably why, in him thinking that he was committing adultery, Yahuwah, I'm sure he dealt with him and it said he repented or whatever, but in all actuality, Yahuwah caused him from committing adultery, right? And still gave him a child, although, y'all get what I'm saying, right? So even through all this rigmarole, it still turned out to be a blessed union, because King David was not, in fact, a bastard child, right? This is your father and your mother. All right, okay. Yahuwah has not chosen any of these. Then Samuel asked, are these all the sons you have? Pause. Back in. There is still the youngest, Jesse replied, but he's out in the fields watching the sheep and goats. Send for him at once, Samuel said. We will not sit down until he arrives. So Jesse sent for him. He was dark and handsome with beautiful eyes. And Yahuwah said, this is the one, anoint him. So David stood there among his brothers. Samuel took the flask of oil he had bought and anointed David with the oil, and the Spirit of Yahuwah came powerfully upon David from that day. Then Samuel returned to Ramah. And there's something I also like to point out every time we see it, with the exception of Saul. The last time I didn't really point it out too much, but a lot of times coming out of the church house, we only hear that Yahuwah's Spirit is in the New Testament, when Yahuwah's Spirit was being poured out all through the Old Testament, right? And it says it, like, how do we ever believe that Yahuwah's Spirit was not present in the Old Testament? It surely was, right? Okay. So David stood there among his brothers. Samuel took the flask of oil he had bought and anointed David with the oil, and the Spirit of Yahuwah came powerfully upon David from that day on. Then Samuel returned to Ramah. Now, the Spirit of Yahuwah had left Saul, and Yahuwah sent a tormenting spirit that filled him with depression and fear. Some of Saul's servants said to him, a tormenting spirit from Yahuwah is troubling you. Let us find a good musician to play the harp whenever the tormenting spirit troubles you. He will play soothing music, and you will soon be well again. All right, Saul said, find me someone who plays well and bring him here. One of the servants said to Saul, one of Jesse's sons from Bethlehem is a talented harp player. Not only that, he is a brave warrior, a man of war, and has good judgment. He is also a fine-looking young man, and Yahuwah is with him. So Saul sent messengers to Jesse to say, send me your son David, the shepherd. Jesse responded by sending David to Saul along with a young goat, a donkey loaded with bread, and a wineskin full of wine. So David went to Saul and began serving him. Saul loved David very much, and David became his armor-bearer. Then Saul sent word to Jesse asking, please let David remain in my service, for I am very well pleased with him. And whenever the tormenting spirit from Yahuwah troubled Saul, David would play the harp. Then Saul would feel better, and the tormenting spirit would go away. So it says that Saul wasn't afflicted by the devil. It says Yahuwah sent a tormenting spirit. A tormenting spirit from Yahuwah troubled Saul. And whenever the tormenting spirit from Yahuwah troubled Saul, David would play the harp. Then Saul would feel better and the tormenting spirit would go away. Alright, y'all ever watch how music soothes the soul? But it has to be a calming music. Just like music can soothe, music can also get you riled up. It can get you into a state of depression and all kinds of stuff. Maybe Aliyah, but he would have need to been drunk through that whole pregnancy for him not to eat. Or I don't know. Okay, I get what you're saying. You're talking about maybe he was drunk when he went down there when he thought he was sleeping with the servant girl. Shalom, Josiah. I don't know, because you got I guess I don't know. It's possible. It's possible, but I figure if somebody go through this elaborate scheme, why are you gonna feel you? I guess you could throw one or two back, but to be completely intoxicated when it's something you've been thinking about, I would think you would want to be at your full capacity, senses intact, not drunk, so you can enjoy this thing you've been planning out to get all this time, right? No, baby, I don't know. Maybe he was. It said he was a pious man. Maybe he needed it didn't say, but maybe he needed a little more strength or courage to actually go down there and commit this act, right? Because alcohol is called liquid courage, right? Get a little bit in you, a little bit too much, and you start doing things you wouldn't normally do while you were in your right mind, right? Okay. Maybe. It's a possibility. It didn't say that, but it could be. I don't know. Okay. 1 Samuel chapter 17. But the thing was, whatever he thought he was doing, it was thwarted by Yahuwah and his wife. Every time I think about it, I just laugh. Okay. The Philistines now mustered their army for battle, encamped between Sokoth and Judah, and Azekah at Ephaz Dammim. Saul conquered by gathering his Israelite troops near the valley of Elah. So the Philistines and Israelites faced each other on opposite hills with the valley between them. Then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel. He was over 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet, and his bronze coat of mail weighed 125 pounds. He also wore bronze leg armor, and he carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. The shaft of his spear was as heavy and as thick as a weaver's beam, tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. His armor-bearer walked ahead of him carrying a shield. Goliath stood and shouted a taunt across to the Israelites. "Why are you all coming out to fight?" he called. "I am the Philistine champion, but you are only the servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me. If he kills me, then we will be your slaves. But if I kill him, you will be our slaves. I defy the armies of Israel today. Send me a man who will fight." When Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. Now David was a son of a man named Jesse, an Ephrathite from Bethlehem in the land of Judah. Jesse was an old man at that time, and he had 8 sons. Jesse's 3 oldest sons. Look, see, now they're saying Jesse got 8 sons, but before, when Jesse didn't know, but his wife knew, "Nah, bro, we got 8. We got 8. But it said all of Jesse's 7 sons, but now that Jesse is aware that his wife knows about his little indiscretion, which is really not an indiscretion at all, but only in mind. But sis was okay because you ended up sleeping with her anyway, even though you still didn't know until many years later. King David was a shepherd out in the fields, my G, by the time you found out. So some years had passed. And you still thought you and your wife had only gave birth to 7 sons. Listen, I'll read it again, verse 12. Now David was a son of a man named Jesse, an Ephrathite from Bethlehem in the land of Judah. Jesse was an old man at the time, and he had 8 sons. Jesse's 3 oldest sons, Eliab, Abinadab, and Shemiah, had already joined Saul's army to fight the Philistines. David was the youngest son. David's 3 older brothers stayed with Saul's army, but David went back and forth so he could help his father with the sheep in Bethlehem. For 40 days, every morning and evening, the Philistine champion strutted in front of the Israelite army. One day, Jesse said to David, "Take this basket of roasted grain and 10 loaves of bread and carry them quickly to your brothers, and give these 10 cuts of cheese to their captain. See how your brothers are getting along, and bring back a report on how they are doing." David's brothers were with Saul and the Israelite army at the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines. So David left the sheep with another shepherd and set out early the next morning with the gifts, as Jesse had directed him. He arrived at the camp just as the Israelite army was leaving for the battlefield with shouts and battle cries. Soon the Israelite and Philistine forces stood facing each other, army against army. David left his things with the keeper of supplies and hurried out to the ranks to greet his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, came out from the Philistine ranks. Then David heard him shout his usual taunt to the army of Israel. As soon as the Israelite army saw him, they began to run away in fright. "Have you seen the giant?" the men asked. "He comes out each day to defy Israel. The king has offered a huge reward to anyone who kills him. He will give that man one of his daughters for a wife, and the man's entire family will be exempted from paying taxes." David asked a soldier standing nearby, "What will a man get for killing this Philistine and ending his defiance of Israel? Who is this pagan Philistine anyway, that he is allowed to defy the armies of the living God?" And these men gave David the same reply. They said, "Yes, that is the reward for killing him." But when David's oldest brother, Eliab, heard David talking to the men, he was angry. "What are you doing around here anyway?" he demanded. "What about those few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? I know about your pride and deceit. You just want to see the battle." "What have I done now?" David replied. "I was only asking a question." He walked over to some of the others and asked them the same thing and received the same answer. Then David's question was reported to King Saul, and the king sent for him. "Don't worry about this Philistine," David told Saul. "I'll go fight him." "Don't be ridiculous," Saul replied. "There is no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth." But David persisted. "I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats," he said. "When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I have done this both to lions and bears, and I'll do the same thing to this pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. Yahuwah, who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear, will rescue me from this Philistine." Saul finally consented. "All right, go ahead," he said, "and may Yahuwah be with you." Then Saul gave David his own armor, a bronze helmet and a coat of mail. David put it on, strapped a sword over it, and took a step or two to see what it was like, for he had never worn such things before. "I can't go in these," he protested to Saul. "I'm not used to them." So David took them off again. He picked up 5 smooth stones from a stream and put them in his shepherd bag. Then, armed with only his shepherd's staff and sling, he started across the valley to fight the Philistine. Goliath walked out toward David with his shield bearer ahead of him, sneering in contempt at this ruddy-faced boy. "Am I a dog," he roared at David, "that you come out to fight me with a stick?" And he cursed David by the name of his gods. "Come over here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and wild animals," Goliath yelled. David replied to the Philistine, "You come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of Yahuwah, the Lord of heaven's armies, and the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today, Yahuwah will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head, and then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And everyone assembled here will know that Yahuwah rescues his people, but not with sword and spear. This is Yahuwah's battle, and he will give you to us." Goliath moved closer to attack. David quickly ran out to meet him. Reaching into his shepherd bag, taking out a stone, he hurled it with his sling and hit the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank in, and Goliath stumbled and fell face down on the ground. So in that same story where we read about King David and how his birth came about, we also, I believe, on that same day we read about Goliath and what his armor was. His armor was so knitted tightly together that there was no opening, nothing that could pierce his armor, right? Not to mention that he was a friggin' giant, right? So it tells us the detail on how he was able to catch Goliath off guard as they were running towards each other. By David speaking Yahuwah's name, right, it caused Goliath to go into like this daze, right? And he was confused. And what happened was, when he heard, what was it? He heard something, and he looked up to heaven. And when he looked up, David saw that his armor was exposed right where his helmet, it had an opening like where his eyes or whatever, but he noticed the opening. David's precision was so on point that he slung that sling as hard as he could. And I'm sure if we could see into the spiritual realm at that time, it was probably angelic forces behind that stone slinging that sunk that stone down in the middle of that impossible opening, that Goliath just happened to look up, because it said he was bereft of his senses and looked up because he thought somebody was calling his name. So while he was dazed and confused, he looked up. King David saw the opener, dropped it right precision right there. Immediately he began to hit the ground, right? And so if you was there that day, you can, it's some more details to that, but that's how David overcame Goliath, right? I read it again, verse 48. As Goliath moved closer to attack, David quickly ran out to meet him, reaching into his shepherd's bag. I should have went up, but he said, "You come to me with spear." I'll go back up a couple more verses. David replied to the Philistine, "You come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of Yahuwah, the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today Yahuwah will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head. And then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And everyone assembled here will know that Yahuwah rescues his people, but not with sword and spear. This is Yahuwah's battle, and he will give you to us." As David moved closer to attack, as Goliath moved closer to attack, David quickly ran out to meet him. Reaching into his shepherd's bag and taking out a stone, he hurled it with his sling and hit the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank in, and Goliath stumbled and fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with only a sling and a stone, for he had no sword. Then David ran over and pulled Goliath's sword from its sheath, and David used it to kill him and cut off his head. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they turned and ran. Then the men of Israel and Judah gave a great shout of triumph and rushed after the Philistines, chasing them as far as Gath and the gates of Ekron. The bodies of the dead and wounded Philistines were strewn all along the road from Sharim as far as Gath and Ekron. Then the Israelite army returned and plundered the deserted Philistine camp. David took the Philistines' head to Jerusalem, but he stored the man's armor in his own tent. As Saul watched David go out to fight the Philistine, he asked Abner, the commander of his army, "Abner, whose son is this young man?" "I really don't know," Abner declared. "Well, find out who he is," the king told him. As soon as David returned from killing Goliath, Abner brought him to Saul with the Philistine's head still in his hand. "Tell me about your father, young man," Saul said. And David replied, "His name is Jesse, and we live in Bethlehem." All right, y'all, last chapter for today before we hop over to the legends of the Jews. 1 Samuel chapter 18. After David had finished talking with Saul, he met Jonathan, the king's son. There was an immediate bond between them, for Jonathan loved David. From that day on, Saul kept David with him and would not let him return home. And Jonathan made a solemn pact with David because he loved him as he loved himself. Jonathan sealed the pact by taking off his robe and giving it to David, together with his tunic, sword, bow, and belt. Whatever Saul asked David to do, David did it successfully. So Saul made him a commander over the men of war, an appointment that was welcomed by the people and Saul's officers alike. When the victorious Israelite army was returning home after David had killed the Philistine, women from all the towns of Israel came out to meet King Saul. They sang and danced for joy with tambourines and cymbals. This was their song. Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s. This made Saul very angry. What is this, he said. They credit David with 10,000s and me only with thousands? Next, they'll be making him their king. So from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. The very next day, a tormenting spirit from Yahuwah overwhelmed Saul. A tormenting spirit from Yahuwah overwhelmed Saul, and he began to rave in his house like a madman. David was playing a harp as he did each day, but Saul had a spear in his hand, and he suddenly hurled it at David, intending to pin him to the wall, but David escaped him twice. Saul was then afraid of David, for Yahuwah was with David and had turned away from Saul. Finally, Saul sent him away and appointed him a commander over 1,000 men, and David faithfully led his troops into battle. David continued to succeed in everything he did, for Yahuwah was with him. When Saul recognized this, he became even more afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David because he was so successful at leading his troops into battle. One day, Saul said to David, I am ready to give you my older daughter, Merab, as your wife. But first, you must prove yourself to be a real warrior by fighting Yahuwah's battles. For Saul thought, I'll send him out against the Philistines and let them kill him rather than me doing it myself. Who am I, and what is my family in Israel that I should be the king's son-in-law? David exclaimed. My father's family is nothing. So when the time came for Saul to give his daughter Merab in marriage to David, he gave her instead to Adriel, a man from Mahola. In the meantime, Saul's daughter Michal had fallen in love with David, and Saul was delighted when he heard about it. Here was another chance to see him killed by the Philistines, Saul said to himself. But to David he said, Today you have a second chance to become my son-in-law. Then Saul told his men to say to David, The king really likes you, and so do we. Why don't you accept the king's offer and become his son-in-law? When Saul's men said these things to David, he replied, How can a poor man from a humble family afford the price for a daughter of a king? When Saul's men reported this back to the king, he told them, Tell David that all I want for the bride price is 100 Philistine foreskins. Vengeance on all my enemies is all I really want. But Saul had in mind that David was to be killed in the fight. David was delighted to accept the offer. Oh, that was Uncle Nathaniel. Apparently he didn't get the memo that we've been live for a minute. He must not have got the I don't know. I don't know what's going on with Facebook and their notifications. But we here. He's like, is all well with you? Okay. David was delighted to accept the offer. Before the time limit expired, he and his men went out and killed 200 Philistines. Then David fulfilled the king's requirement by presenting all their foreskins to him. So Saul gave his daughter Michal to David to be his wife. When Saul realized that Yahuwah was with David and how much his daughter Michal loved him, Saul became even more afraid of him, and he remained David's enemy for the rest of his life. Every time the commanders of the Philistines attacked, David was more successful against them than all the rest of Saul's officers. So David's name became very famous. All right, y'all. So that was 1 Samuel 16, 17, and 18. Let's pick up where we left off at yesterday in the Legends of the Jews, page 441. And we are starting with the section Jezebel. All right, y'all. Jezebel. Okay. All right. Wicked as Ahab was, his wife Jezebel was incomparably worse. Indeed, remember we read about Ahab yesterday. So remember, he did all kind of crazy stuff, but it said he did have one good trait about him, that he studied the Torah, right? Although he didn't really obey it too much, he studied it. Look. Wicked as Ahab was, his wife Jezebel was incomparably worse. Indeed, she is in great part the cause of his suffering, and Ahab realized it. So remember, man, I told y'all got to be careful who you decide to wife. Who you decide to make wife, either she going to make your life wonderful, or she going to make your life a living hell. And you going to pay for it, and you going to know it too, right? Okay, let me just go back, start over. Wicked as Ahab was, his wife Jezebel was incomparably worse. She indeed is in great part the cause of his suffering, and Ahab realized it. Once Rabbi Levi expounded the scriptural verse in which the iniquity of Ahab and the influence of his wife over him are discussed, dwelling upon the first for 2 months. Ahab visited him in a dream and reproached him with the expiating on the first half, or expounding on the first half of the verse to the exclusion of the latter half. Thereupon the rabbi took the second half of the verse as the text of his lectures for the next 2 months, demonstrating all the time that Jezebel was the instigator of Ahab's sins, right? Women, you are wrong if you are causing your husband to sin, right? I mean, neither one of you should be causing either one to sin. Remember, you're a powerhouse together. You can't have one without the other if you will work together, right? You're equally powerful, but only when you come together. Just like the socket and the plug. The woman is the socket, the man is the plug. The man enters the woman, boom, life happens. Same thing. When you come together, it's either going to happen in the right way or it's going to happen in reverse. And a lot of things is happening in reverse, right? We need to reverse that and start moving forward, okay? Look, okay. Thereupon, the rabbi took the second half of the verse as the text of his lectures for the next 2 months, demonstrating all the time that Jezebel was the instigator of Ahab's sins. Her misdeeds are told in the scriptures. To those there are recounted What? Okay. To those there recounted must be added her practice of attaching unchaste images to Ahab's chariot for the purpose of stimulating his carnal desires. Therefore, those parts of his chariot were spattered with his blood when he fell at the hand of the enemy. She had her husband weighed every day, and the increase of his weight in gold she sacrificed to the idol. Jezebel was not only the daughter and the wife of a king, she was also a co-regent with her husband, the only reigning queen in Hebrew history except Athaliah. Hardened sinner though Jezebel was, even she had good qualities. One of them was her capacity for sympathy with others in joy and sorrow. Whenever a funeral cortege passed the royal palace, Jezebel would descend and join the ranks of the mourners, and also when a marriage procession went by, she took part in the merrymaking in honor of the bridal couple. By way of reward, the limbs and organs with which she had executed these good deeds were left intact by the horses that trampled her to death in the portion of Jezreel. Sheesh. Of Joram, the sons of Ahab, it can only be said that he had his father's faults without his father's virtues. Ahab was liberal, Joram miserly. Nay, he even indulged in usurious practices. From Obadiah, the pious protector of the prophets in hiding, he exacted a high rate of interest on the money needed for their support. As a consequence, at his death he fell pierced. At his death he fell pierced between his arms, the arrow going out of his heart, for he had stretched out his arms to receive usury, and had hardened his heart against compassion. Look, there we go. Measure for measure. How you sin is how you get dealt with. Whew, look. In his reign, only one event deserves mention: his campaign against Moab, undertaken in alliance with the kings of Judah and Edom, and ending with a splendid victory won by the allied kings. Joram and his people, it need hardly be said, failed to derive the proper lesson from the war. Their disobedience to Yahuwah's commands went on as before. The king of Moab, on the other hand, in his way, sought to come nearer to Yahuwah. He assembled his astrologers and inquired of them why it was that the Moabites, successful in their warlike enterprises against the other nations, could not measure up to the standards of the Israelites. They explained that Yahuwah was gracious to Israel because his ancestor Abraham had been ready to sacrifice Isaac at his bidding. Then the Moabite king reasoned that if Yahuwah set so high a value upon mere good intention, how much greater would be the reward for its actual execution. And he who ordinarily was a sun worshiper proceeded to sacrifice his son, the successor to the throne, to the God of Israel. Yahuwah said, "The heathen do not know me, and their wrongdoing arises from ignorance. But you Israelites know me, and yet you acted rebelliously towards me." As a result of the 7 years famine, conditions in Samaria were frightful during the great part of Joram's reign. In the first year, everything stored in the houses was eaten up. In the second, the people supported themselves with what they could scrape together in the fields. The flesh of clean animals sufficed for the 3rd year. In the 4th, the sufferers resorted to the unclean animals. In the 5th, reptiles and insects. And in the 6th, the monstrous things. And in the 6th, the monstrous thing happened that women crazed by hunger consumed their own children as food. But the acme of distress was reached in the 7th year, when men sought to gnaw the flesh from their own bones. To these occurrences the prophecies of Joel apply, for he lived in the awful days of the famine of Joram's reign. Luckily, Yahuwah revealed to Joel at the same time how Israel would be rescued from the famine. The winter following the 7 years of dearth brought no relief, for the rain held back until the 1st month of Nisan. When it began to fall, the prophet said to the people, "Go forth and sow seed." But they remonstrated with him, "Shall one who hath saved a measure of wheat or 2 measures of barley not use his store for food and live, rather than for seed and die?" But the prophet urged them, "Nay, go forth and sow seed." And a miracle happened. In the ant hills and the mouse holes they found enough grain for seed, and they cast it upon the ground on the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th day of Nisan. On the 5th day of the month, rain fell again. 11 days later, the grain was ripe, and the offering of the omer could be bought at the appointed time, on the 16th of the month. Of this the psalmist was thinking when he said, "They that sow in tears shall reap in joy." Chapter 7. Elijah. We made it. Listen. Okay, I didn't realize we would be here so soon. I knew it was coming up, but I didn't realize we would be starting it today. I just told y'all about it yesterday. Okay, we're here. Okay, I'm so excited. I'm so excited about this. Chapter 7. Elijah before his translation. Okay. The biblical account of the prophet Elijah, of his work and the work during the reigns of Ahab and his son Joram, gives but a faint idea of a personage whose history begins with Israel's sojourn in Egypt and will end only when Israel, under the leadership of the Messiah, have taken up his abode again in Palestine. The scripture tells us only the name of Elijah's home, but it must be added that he was a priest identical with Phinehas, the priest zealous for the honor of Yahuwah, who distinguished himself on the journey through the desert and played a prominent role again in the times of the judges. Elijah's first appearance in the period of the kings was his meeting with Ahab in the house of Hiel, the Beth Elite, the commander-in-chief of the Israelitish army, whom he was visiting to condole with him for the loss of his sons. Yahuwah himself had charged the prophet to offer sympathy to Hiel, whose position demanded that honor be paid him. Elijah at first refused to seek out the sinner who had violated the divine injunction against rebuilding Jericho, for he said that the blasphemous talk of such evildoers always called forth his rage. Thereupon Yahuwah promised Elijah that fulfillment should attend whatever imprecation might in his wrath escape him against the godless for their unholy speech. As the prophet entered the general's house, he heard Hiel utter these words, "Blessed be Yahuwah, the God of the pious, who grants fulfillment to the words of the pious." Hiel thus acknowledged that he had been justly afflicted with Joshua's curse against him who should rebuild Jericho. Ahab mockingly asked him, "Was not Moses greater than Joshua? And did he not say that Yahuwah would let no rain descend upon the earth if Israel served and worshipped idols? There is not an idol known to which I do not pay homage, yet we enjoy all that is goodly and desirable. Dost thou believe that if the words of Moses remain unfulfilled, the words of Joshua will come true?" Elijah rejoined, "Be it as thou sayest, as Yahuwah, the God of Israel, liveth, before whom I stand, there shall be no dew nor rain these years, but according to my word." Boom. I'm telling you, Elijah, you better let him know you know how to control the elements, my G. Look, he said at my word, because he had already got the inside scoop from Yah, right? So anytime you get the inside scoop from Yah, you would say, go down there, and he ain't got to be doing all in the name of Yah. He said, no, he already gave me authority. I know that there is authority, right? So he said, it's at my word, my G. There will be no rain. Look, read again. And he looked at him like, yeah, okay. But Yahuwah allows that to happen for those who are faithful and obedient to him, just like he told Moses, at your word, whatever you say, my G. Whatever you say, my G. I'm big G, you little G, my G. Whatever you say. I'm backing it, right? Look, hold on. Ahab mockingly asked him, "Was not Moses greater than Joshua?" Oh, I'm sorry, y'all. I always got to double check. I know business calls when they come through. I have to say Elijah's my favorite. I know, right? Look, okay. I would like to say that our oldest son I named Elijah because of the prophet Elijah, but that is not why, right? When I was younger, this was before we had even moved from Virginia, moved to Illinois. I think I was like 11 or 12. When did we move? Because we moved to Illinois, I was 14, turning 15. I know a couple years before that, I had never heard the name Elijah before until I had watched that movie with Macaulay Culkin called The Good Child. And remember his brother? I think his brother in that movie was called Elijah. When I heard the name, I was like 10, 11 years old, but something happened to me when I heard that name Elijah. I was so, I don't even know how this happened. I was so enthralled with the name Elijah. I'm like, is that a real name? Now I'm a kid, 10, 11 years old. But when I heard it, I thought it was the most beautifulest name I'd ever heard, right? And even though, like my mom, they would read the Bible, and I hadn't yet at this point in my life made it to the portion in the Bible where there was actually a prophet named Elijah. And so years down the line, when I actually read that portion, I was like, oh, that name. And it came back to me, and that whole feeling washed over me again, right? And I'm like, oh my, wait, is somebody in the Bible called Elijah? Oh my gosh. So when I heard it, right, when I was 10, 11, I said to myself, I said, I am going to name my first son Elijah. So that's actually how my 24-year-old, he got his name. I heard it when I was young, and it so enthralled and captivated me, and I thought it was so beautiful. Like when I heard, it's weird, y'all, but it's like when I heard it, it was like, I don't even really know how to describe it, but it was a name that stuck with me, and it was literally like music to my ears. And as I grew, I kind of understand. I was like, oh, snap, this was something like ordained by you, y'all. Okay. So that's why anytime we talk about I get that whole, that whole thing is like replaying in my mind from the time I first heard this name, right? Okay, so that's why everything about Elijah I love, right? Okay, boom. All right, look. Okay, look. Ahab mockingly asked him, was not Moses greater than Joshua? And did he not say that Yahuwah would let no rain descend upon the earth if Israel served and worshiped idols? There is not an idol known to which I do not pay homage, yet we enjoy all that is goodly and desirable. Dost thou believe that if the words of Moses remain unfulfilled, the words of Joshua will come true? Elijah rejoined, be it as thou sayest, as Yahuwah, the God of Israel, liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word. In pursuance of his promise, Yahuwah could not but execute the words of Elijah, and neither dew nor rain watered the land. A famine ensued, and Ahab sought to wreak his vengeance upon the prophet. To escape the king's persecutions, Elijah hid himself. He was sustained with food brought from a larder of the pious King Jehoshaphat by ravens, which at the same time would not approach near to the house of the iniquitous Ahab. Ravens was bringing Elijah his food. Like, that still blows my mind to this day, but now it blows my mind, but I understand like what's happened. Like, this stuff was so normal, not that it was normal, that it was like we take it for granted, but these were common things that was happening among Yahuwah's people. He was always using supernatural things, where they say, oh, stay away from that, that's magic, black magic. They get you thinking that supernatural things happening is bad, but you dealing with the creator of entirely everything, the natural and the supernatural, right? And if he's chosen you as his own, why would he not reveal some of these secret cool things to you, right? I'm like, oh, that was pretty freaking cool, thank you, right? And some things he shares that should be kept secret, just between you and him. And he shares secrets with his friends, right? And some things, some secrets that he revealed, he'll allow you to share with the masses. But some secrets the masses can't handle quite yet. So some of them secrets he just allows you to enjoy quietly, right? Okay. I'll just go on. Look. A famine ensued, and Ahab sought to wreak his havoc upon the prophet. To escape the king's persecutions, Elijah hid himself. He was sustained with food brought from the larder of the pious King Jehoshaphat by ravens, which at the same time would not approach near to the house of the iniquitous Ahab. Yahuwah, who has compassion even upon the impious, tried to induce the prophet to release him from his promise. To influence him, he made the brook run dry, whence Elijah drew water for his thirst. Did you say you want to drop?
I do want to drop low, but I got to get him the key. I totally forgot about it.
Okay.
The key to the mailbox in the back.
Oh, okay.
I gotta go give him the key first, and then come back to the drop off.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll be ready. To influence him, he made the brook run dry, whence Elijah drew water for his thirst. As this failed to soften the inflexible prophet, Yahuwah resorted to the expedient of causing him pain through the death of the son of the widow with whom Elijah was abiding, and by whom he had been received with great honor. When her son, who was later known to be the prophet Jonah, died, she thought Yahuwah had formerly been gracious to her on the account of her great worthiness as compared with the merits of her neighbors and the inhabitants of the city, and now he abandoned her because her virtues had become as naught. My bad. Okay. In the presence of the great prophet. In his distress, Elijah supplicated Yahuwah to revive the child. Now Yahuwah had the prophet in his power. he could give heed unto Elijah's prayer, only provided the prophet release him from the promise about a drought. For resuscitation from death is brought about by means of dew. That's right. Look. That wholly just clicked in my brain, right? So remember, in the beginning, we was learned. Look. Okay. So remember when Yahuwah was given the Torah, right? They was out there. They were about to have the whole wedding feast and everything, or the marriage ceremony where Yahuwah bestowed the Torah upon Israel. And remember, Yahuwah spoke. And they said, look, Moses, we know you the man and you talk to him face to face, but we want to talk to him face to face. Let us personally hear his voice. Okay, I'm gonna go see what he's saying. Hey, you heard him? They said they want to see you face to face. Tell them get ready. I'm coming in 3 days. Tell the men not to go into their wives, clean themselves up, be prepared for me. 3 days, my G. Go tell them 3 days I'm coming. Get ready, right? Moses went down there. Hey, he said he coming in 3 days. Men, back up off your wives. Y'all got to stay clean. Everybody be ready. 3 days to come, right? 3 days later, he came and spoke, right? He said, I am Yahuwah, your God, who led you out of Egypt, right? Have no other gods before my face. The voice of Yahuwah was so magnificent that all of them, it said, it blew the power from him speaking, blew the entire camp of Israel back a space of 12 miles, right? Blew them back a space of 12 miles. And the Torah came back to Yahuwah. He said, great master and creator of all the worlds, who did you give me to, the living or the dead? He said, I gave you to the living. He said, all these people are dead. He said, hold up. I'm going to drop some of this resurrection dew on them. Remember, the dew is what is going to revive the dead, right? He said, we'll drop a little bit of this dew on them. Give them a foretaste of what's coming in the future world when it's time to call up everybody, right? The day of judgment, the day of resurrection, that dew from heaven. We're going to get them a little foretaste of what's going to happen. So that's what happened. The dew from heaven, Yahuwah sprinkled it on them. You get a little bit of dew. You get dew. You get dew, and you get dew too. Like, right? And resurrected everybody. Everybody died, and he just resurrected them. Get up. Let's go. Right? Look. Okay. Let me go back one sentence. Let me go back 2. Okay, let me go back 3. Elijah was abiding and by, hold on. Oh, I skipped it. Okay. Let me just go back here. Yahuwah, who has compassion even upon the impious, tried to induce the prophet to release him from his promise. To influence him, he made the brook run dry, whence Elijah drew water for his thirst. As this failed to soften the inflexible prophet, Yahuwah resorted to the expedient of causing him pain through the death of the son of the widow with whom Elijah was abiding. So remember the widow's son that he stretched out. Lord, let this boy's breath return unto him. Did you bless them just to curse them? You know, and she said, my Lord, didn't I tell you why would you pray this? You know, and then my son is taken from me, right? But Yahuwah's working behind the scenes of all of this, right? This was Yahuwah's acting indirectly behind the scene. Okay. As this failed to, I should have went back up with what Jehoshaphat said. Okay, but it said okay, let me go back. I just gotta go back. I gotta go back just so you hear it all again. Okay. Ahab mockingly asked him, was not Moses greater than Joshua? And did he not say that Yahuwah would let no rain descend upon the earth if Israel served and worshiped idols? There is not an idol known which I do not pay homage, yet we enjoy all that is goodly and desirable. Dost thou believe that if the words of Moses remained unfilled, the words of Joshua will come true? Elijah rejoined, be it as thou sayest, as Yahuwah, the God of Israel, liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word. In pursuance of his promise, Yahuwah could not but execute the words of Elijah, and neither dew nor rain watered the land. As famine ensued, and Ahab sought to wreak his vengeance upon the prophet, To escape the king's persecutions, Elijah hid himself. He was sustained with food brought from the larder of the pious King Jehoshaphat by ravens, which at the same time would not approach near to the house of the iniquitous Ahab. Yahuwah, who has compassion even upon the impious, tried to induce the prophet to release him from his promise. So he was like, Elijah, go ahead and let me break my promise. He said, because I'm good to all, right? I'm just surprised that he let him go through this whole thing, right? And it's like he's asking Elijah, can I break my promise that I made about this famine? Look, like he didn't have to ask him. Like, you're the God of all the created worlds, right? Look, Yahuwah, who has compassion upon even the impious, tried to induce the prophet to release him from his promise. To influence him, he made the brook run dry, whence Elijah drew water for his thirst. As this failed to soften the inflexible prophet, Yahuwah resorted to the expedient of causing him pain through the death of the son of the widow with whom he was abiding, and by whom he had been received with great honor. When her son, who was later known to be as the prophet Jonah, died, remember, the boy that died, Elijah laid himself over the boy 3 times, let this boy's breath come back into his body, let his life come back. That was Jonah. Yep, okay. When her son, who was later to be known as the prophet Jonah, died, she thought Yahuwah had formerly been gracious to her on the account of her great worthiness as compared with the merits of her neighbors and the inhabitants of the city, and now he had abandoned her because her virtues had become as naught in the presence of the great prophet. In his distress, Elijah supplicated Yahuwah to revive the child. Now Yahuwah had the prophet in his power. He could give heed unto Elijah's prayer only provided the prophet release him from the promise about the drought. For resuscitation from death is brought about by the means of dew. And that's how I started talking about Yahuwah dropping the dew on it, right? Because resurrection only happens with the dew from heaven. While people out here, and I tried to revive the dead. I did. But I was so ignorant of spiritual things. I think Yahuwah saw my good heart. But it didn't happen. He stayed there. Matter of fact, at that time when I was doing it, I think if he had got up out of that coffin, everybody in the church probably would have ran out of there. Like, we really didn't want what we prayed for, right? Because I hadn't known all of these things back then, and I watched a lot of Pet Cemetery and stuff because, when they dead, they don't come back themselves if they come back to life, right? That's not them. So all that stuff still had to kind of be washed out of my brain. Like, we're praying for the dead to revive, but let them get up out that coffin for real. Everybody's hightailing it out that people probably had heart attacks and die. So it's like, we're going to let them stay dead till we give y'all a little bit more common sense, a little bit more sense where y'all kill yourself from the fear. Right? Okay, look. He could give heed only unto Elijah's prayer, only provided the prophet released him from the promise about a drought. For resuscitation from death is brought about by means of dew. And this remedy was precluded so long as Elijah kept Yahuwah to his word, withholding dew and rain from the earth. Elijah saw there was nothing for it but to yield. However, he first betook himself to Ahab with the purpose of overcoming the obduracy of the people upon whom the famine had made no impression. Manifest wonders displayed before their eyes were to teach them wisdom. The combat between Yahuwah and Baal took place on Carmel, the mount that had esteemed itself the proper place for the greatest event in the Israelitish history. The revelation of the laws was compensated by the many miracles now performed upon it, for its disappointment at Sinai having been preferred to it. The first wonder occurred in connection with the choice of the bullocks. According to Elijah's arrangement with Ahab, one was to be sacrificed to Yahuwah and then one to Baal. A pair of twins raised together were brought before the contestants, and it was decided by lot which belonged to Yahuwah and which to Baal. Elijah had no difficulty in his offering. He quickly led it to his altar, but all the priests of Baal, 850 in number, could not make their victim stir a foot. When Elijah, they say 850, they only give us half of them prophets. and actual canonized. I guess they wanted to make it sound more. Let's just cut half of these down, because one man, we need to make it at least a little bit more believable, right? Look, but all the priests of Baal, 850 in number, could not make their victims stir a foot. When Elijah began to speak persuasively to the bullock of Baal, urging it to follow the idolatrous priest, it opened its mouth and said, "We too, yonder bullock and myself, came forth from the same womb. We took our food from the same manger, and now he has been destined for Yahuwah as an instrument for the glorification of the divine name." For the glorification of the divine name. Oh, y'all. I got some more stuff. This is why I only got 3 hours of sleep last night. I'm like, could it be this easy? Could it be this easy? That thou hast given me another key on how to pronounce the ineffable name. That's why I got, look, just say, I'm trying to say, Father, give me the strength to read. You know how you fall asleep reading something on your phone, and you doze off, and you wake up by the phone smacking you in the lips or in the forehead or in the nose, or you're hearing it hit the floor? That happened about 10 times to me last night. I was trying to stay woke, take it all. I said, okay, Pam, just stop it. Go to sleep. Go to sleep. It's going to be here in the morning. Oh, my God. Oh, y'all, let me give it. Listen, we'll talk about this, but I got to test some stuff. Y'all know I got to test some stuff first. I'll make sure. Hold on. Wait a minute. Father, wait a minute. Hold up. Look. Okay. All right. I'll be so excited, y'all. Look. When Elijah began to speak persuasively to the bullock of Baal, urging it to follow the idolatrous priest, it opened its mouth and said, "We too, yonder bullock and myself, came forth from the same womb. We took our food from the same manger, and now he has been destined for Yahuwah as an instrument for the glorification of the divine name, while I am to be used for Baal as an instrument to enrage my Creator." Elijah urged, "Do thou but follow the priests of Baal, that they may have no excuse, and then thou wilt have a share in that glorification of Yahuwah, for which my bullock will be used." The bullock, "So dost thou advise, but I swear I will not move from the spot unless thou with thine own hands will deliver me up." Elijah thereupon led the bullock to the priests of Baal. In spite of this miracle, the priests sought to deceive the people. They undermined the altar, and Hiel hid himself from under it with the purpose of igniting a fire at the mention of the word of Baal. Look at this. Here they go with their shenanigans. Look, if Baal don't set this on fire, we got somebody already waiting to set it on fire down here. Look. But Yahuwah sent a serpent to kill him. In vain, the false priest cried and called Baal, Baal. The expected flame did not shoot up. To add, look, they doing a sleight of hand magic trick. The same thing with Daniel that went into the king's chambers. He thought the king was like, no, the God that I'm serving, he eating up all this food every night. Daniel was like, king, let me show you something. Let's get some ashes, and we're going to spread it all across your temple, and we're going to lock the door, and we're going to seal it with your ring, king, and we're going to see if your God is truly eating up all this food that your people bring in here. You bring in here every single day. Okay, Dan, let's go ahead and do it. Come back the next day. King inspected. The seal has not been broken. Go ahead and break the seal, king. Okay, open it up. Food is gone. See, Daniel, I told you, king. Let's draw your attention to the floor, shall we? Sleight of hand magic trick, right? You see these ashes? What do they look like? They look like footprints. Footprints of who, my king? Men, women, and children. Let's see where these footprints lead to. Where did they originate? From under the altar did they? Oh, there is a trap door under the altar. Okay, let's do this again. Right, and so then they're recording the act. The king's people sucking up to the king. Oh, yes, king, your God ate all the food, the sacrifice, and everything. Daniel, all of them. Throw all of them into the pit, the wives, children, and everything, because they caught them in the act. The ashes is what gave them away every single night. the lion men around the king, their wives and their children died, because all of them at night, they will all come up in through this trap door that they had created in order to make the king continue living on his fantasy with lies, right? And so he was exposed by Daniel through the wisdom of Yahuwah. I'm gonna show you why. I'm not just gonna tell you he's a fraud, but I'm gonna show you why. And I'm gonna give you undeniable proof, right? So people try to say you fraud, for no, we need undeniable proof, my G, Yahuwah. Give them the undeniable proof. Do this. Now, the king can see himself that they are frauds, right? Lay it all out, plain for him, right? Oh my gosh. Same thing. But Yahuwah sent a serpent to kill him. In vain the false priest cried and called. Baal, the expected flame did not shoot up. To add to the confusion of the idolaters, Yahuwah had imposed silence upon the whole world. The power of the upper and the nether regions were dumb. The universe seemed deserted and desolate, as if without a living creature. If a single sound had made itself heard, the priest would have said, "It is the voice of Baal." That all preparations might be completed in one day, the erection of the altar, the digging of the trench, and whatever else was necessary, Elijah commanded the sun to stand still. For Joshua, he said, "Didst thou stand still that Israel might conquer his enemies? Now stand thou still, neither for my sake, neither for the sake of Israel, but that the name of Yahuwah may be exalted." And the sun obeyed his words. So we know the sun stood still for Abraham, it stood still for Joshua, and it stood still for Elijah, right? Toward evening, Elijah summoned his disciple Elisha and bade him pour water over his hands. A miracle happened. Water flowed out from Elijah's fingers until the whole trench was filled. Then the prophets prayed to Yahuwah to let fire descend, but in such wise that the people would know it would be a wonder from heaven, and not to think it a magician's trick. He spoke, "Lord of the world, thou wilt send me as a messenger at the end of time." Listen, even Elijah knew at this time. He said, "Thou wilt send me as a messenger at the end of time," right? Lord of the world, thou wilt send me as a messenger at the end of time. But if my words do not meet with fulfillment now, the Hebrews cannot expect it to believe me in the latter days, right? His pleading was heard on high, and fire fell from heaven upon the altar, a fire that not only consumed what it touched, but also licked up the water. Nor was that all. His prayer for rain was also granted. Scarcely had these words dropped from his lips, "Though we have no other merits, yet remember the sign of the covenant which the Israelites bear upon their bodies," when the rain fell to the earth. In spite of these miracles, the people persisted in their idolatrous ways and thoughts. Even the 7,000 who had not bowed down unto Baal were unworthy sons of Israel, for they paid homage to the golden cows of Jeroboam. The misdeeds of the people had swelled to such number that they could no longer reckon upon the merits of their fathers to intercede for them. They had overdrawn their account. Oh, but y'all done sinned so much that the prayers to remind Yahuwah of the pious ones. He said, y'all done depleted this account completely. Look, the misdeeds of the people had swelled to such a number that they could no longer reckon upon the merits of their fathers to intercede for them. They had overdrawn their account. When they sank to the point of degradation at which they gave up the sign of the covenant, Elijah could control his wrath no longer, and he accused Israel before Yahuwah. In the cleft of the rock in which Yahuwah had once aforetime appeared to Moses and revealed himself as compassionate and long-suffering, he now met with Elijah and conveyed to him by various signs that it had been better to defend Israel than accuse him. But Elijah, in his zeal for Yahuwah, was inexorable. Then Yahuwah commanded him to appoint Elisha as his successor, for he said, "I cannot do as thou would have me." Furthermore, Yahuwah charged him, "Instead of accusing my children, journey to Damascus, where the Gentiles have an idol for each day of the year. Though Israel hath thrown down my altars and slain my prophets, what concern is it of thine? The four phenomena that Yahuwah sent before his appearance, wind, earthquake, fire, and a still small voice, were to instruct Elijah about the destiny of man. Yahuwah told Elijah that these four represent the worlds through which man must pass. The first stands for this world, fleeting as the wind. The earthquake is the day of death, which makes the human body to tremble and quake. The fire is the tribunal in Gehenna, and the still small voice is the last judgment, when there will be none but Yahuwah alone. About 3 years later, Elijah was taken up into heaven, but not without first undergoing a struggle with the angel of death. He refused to let Elijah enter to heaven at his translation on the ground that he exercised jurisdiction over all mankind, Elijah not accepted. Yahuwah maintained that at creation of heaven and earth, he had explicitly ordered the angel of death to grant entrance to the living prophet, but the angel of death insisted that by Elijah's translation, Yahuwah had given just cause for complaint to all other men who could not escape the doom of death. Thereupon, Yahuwah, Elijah is not like other men. He is able to banish thee from the world, only thou dost not recognize his strength. Excuse me. Hold on. Okay. Thereupon, Yahuwah, Elijah is not like other men. He is able to banish thee from the world, only thou dost not recognize his strength. With the consent of Yahuwah, a combat took place between Elijah and the angel of death. And we know the angel of death, the Samael, right? He always got to come run up against you. He came against Abraham. He couldn't take his soul because his soul was so heavy with righteousness, right? Oh, I can't lift him. Look. With the consent of Yahuwah, a combat took place between Elijah and the angel of death. The prophet was victorious, and if Yahuwah had not restrained him, he would have annihilated his opponent. Holding his defeated enemy under his feet, Elijah ascended heavenward. In heaven, he goes on living for all time. There he sits, records the deeds of men and the chronicles of the world. He has another office besides. He is a psychopomp whose duty is to stand at the crossways in paradise and guide the pious to their appointed places, who brings the souls of sinners up from Gehenna and who brings the souls of sinners up from Gehenna at the approach of the Sabbath and leads them back again to their merited punishment when the day of rest is about to depart, and who conducts these same souls after they have atoned for their sins to the place of everlasting bliss. Elijah's miraculous deeds will be better understood if we remember that he had been an angel from the very first, even before the end of his earthly career. When Yahuwah was about to create man, Elijah said to him, Master of the world, if it be pleasing in thine eyes, I will descend to earth and make myself serviceable to the sons of men. Then Yahuwah changed his angel name, and later, under Ahab, he permitted him to abide among men on earth, that he might convert the world to the belief that Yahuwah is God. Oh my gosh, right? Everybody following another person. They need to be following what Elijah did, the God of Elijah. Look, that's what I be saying now. Now I understand some things. Yeah, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The God of Elijah, the prophet, right? We need to make it known what God we are talking about here, right? That's the one I'm going with every single time, right? Look. He permitted him to abide among. There's a couple movies now. You know, I can throw out some movies, right? But even this principle right here is seen in quite a few movies. Then Yahuwah changed his. Let me go back. Look, let me just go back here. Elijah's miraculous deeds would be better understood if we remember that he had been an angel from the very first, even before the end of his earthly career. When Yahuwah was about to create man, Elijah said to him, Master of the world, if it be pleasing in thine eyes, I will descend to the earth and make myself serviceable to the sons of men. So remember, man was the last creation. We had the heavenly host. So everything was created before him. So apparently it was Elijah that was created when the heavenly hosts were created, right? And he said, Master, let me go down there. And let me be serviceable to men. Let me help them out, and teach them about you, right? Look. When Yahuwah was about to create man, Elijah said to him, Master of the world, if it be pleasing in thine eyes, I will descend to earth and make myself serviceable to the sons of men. Then Yahuwah changed his angel name, and later, under Ahab, he permitted him to abide among men on the earth, that he might convert the world to the belief that Yahuwah is one God. His mission fulfilled, Yahuwah took him again into heaven and said to him, Be thou the guardian spirit of my children forever, and spread the belief in me abroad in the whole world. The spirit of Elijah, right? Be thou the guardian spirit of my children forever, and spread the belief in me abroad in the whole world. His name is Sandalphon. His angel. I just realized this, my G. Hold on. Look, okay. His angel name is Sandalphon, one of the greatest and mightiest of the fiery angel hosts. As such, it is his duty to wreathe garlands for Yahuwah out of the prayers sent aloft by Israel. Besides, he must offer up sacrifices in the invisible sanctuary, for the temple was destroyed only apparently. In reality, it went on existing, hidden from the sight of ordinary mortals. All right, y'all. So we're going to pause right here, and we're going to talk about his translation tomorrow. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yo, so these next few pages, like the next couple days, look. Oh, yes, this is so good. Oh, yeah. The rest of this chapter is not all these pages. This is all about Elijah. Everything about Elijah, right? Look, and then after this, we're going to chapter 8, and it's talking about Elisha. All right, y'all. It's so good. It's so good. It's so good. So tomorrow, we're going to talk about after his translation, y'all. We stopped on page 444. All right, y'all. So that was Legends of the Jews, page 441 to page 444, and we read 1 Samuel 16, 17, and 18, y'all. It is Thursday, March the 25th, 2021, day 111 of year 3 of reading through the books of the law and the prophets, and of the 3-year consecutive day count, day 780. That's without the Sabbath days and the feast day, Sabbath days added in. And remember, we're coming up on Passover this weekend. Passover is Saturday. Feast of Unleavened Bread begins the very next day, the 15th day of the month, which will be a full moon outside, y'all. Yes, that's how we can verify the first day, which is also a Sabbath day and a true Sabbath day, because this moon cycle being the first month of the year, the Sabbaths line up on Sunday for this moon cycle, and lo and behold, the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is a Sabbath indeed, falls on the Sabbath for this moon cycle. Y'all, it don't get no better than that. But I tell you, every time I think about it, it just blows my mind how it all lines up perfectly. And some people living out this month like it's the 13th month. You ain't never said nothing about no 13th month. Not in my studies as of this point, because if there was a 13th month, this would be off. But it's perfect right now. And Enoch, the book of Enoch tells us about what would be happening and taking place in the first month, right? And it labels the earthworms coming. You can see these things happen. The earthworms coming up out of the ground. The trees are blooming. This tree just bloomed here a couple days ago. That's a telltale sign for me, because it's bare one day, and the next is like, did that bloom overnight? Like literally every year. Even my husband said, the tree bloomed again. It was just empty yesterday. I don't know how it happens, but it's like, because it's all white and big and beautiful sitting right here on the corner. It's just, oh my gosh. So we're in the springtime. They going on like it's another month. I ain't going to get into that. They're misguided. That's all I'm going to say about that. All right, y'all. Let me go ahead and do this blessing real quick. I think we already lost a couple people because they had to go to work, which is okay, because if you want a man's dime, give the man his time until Yahuwah can free you and you can be the man, right? Or the woman, right? Or whatever. But don't be stealing time, folks. All right. The blessing is found in Numbers chapter 6, verses 22 through 27. And Yahuwah spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Aaron and unto his sons, saying, On this wise ye shall bless the children of Israel, saying unto them, May Yahuwah bless us and keep us. May Yahuwah make his face to shine upon us and be gracious unto us. May Yahuwah lift up his countenance upon us and give us peace. And they shall put my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them. And remember, people, the first 21 verses of Numbers chapter 3 is the Nazirite vow. Man or woman can take it. All right, y'all. So I just want to do that just in case, some of y'all had to get out of here and go to work. Right? Okay. All right. So I'm gonna check through here, y'all. I surely enjoyed the reading today, like I always do. I really always do. All right. Since we speaking of the angel of death, would Absalom take over the angel of death position since he's king in hell, or was it figuratively speaking? No, he's not taking over the angel of death is not residing in hell, believe it or not. Although he can freely enter in, but he's a lot of time in heaven, right? I mean, he goes between the two. But Absalom is just like you have commanders and stuff. They have different ranks. If you're familiar with military rankings and stuff, he doesn't stay like at one place. Like he's not like sitting down there like Satan, right? That's from my understanding. But Absalom just has a rank, like one of the officers down there, right? And according to what we read in the legends of the Jews, it should be the legends of the Hebrews, the legends of Yahuwah's people. He's just kind of like one of the gatekeepers down there who doesn't actually, because he's the son of King David, that's what saved his hide, right? He's down there in that heat and stuff, but he is not actually tortured. But he is being punished for a time for what he did while he was in the flesh, right? So, but yeah, no, he's definitely not taking over the angel of death position. And the angel of death, Samael ain't trying to give up his position. Remember, Yahuwah said, look, if you don't go give me the soul of Moses, you're going to lose your position. And I'm going to put somebody else over your lot. And so he went back fighting with everything he has. I can't do it. I can't touch the soul of Moses. He's too heavy, right? Look, so no, I don't think it was figuratively speaking. Now, today, I don't think it was figuratively speaking, but he's definitely not taking over the position of the angel of death. He has his own position. The angel of death has his own position. All right. Titus. I know. Love the word. Okay, y'all. So that's it. I got to get going. Got a few things to do today. Yeah, just make sure if you're observing the Feast of Unleavened Bread, remember, unleavened bread, you don't eat it the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread all the way to the last day, but you also don't eat it on Passover, right? So the Feast of Unleavened Bread, you can technically say it starts with the Passover meal, right? So all the yeast should be out of your house by Passover, because it says you are to eat unleavened bread with the Passover meal, right? So all the yeast products, leaven or whatever, needs to be out your house. Just be on the safe side by tomorrow. You need to have it all out tomorrow by Friday, because the Passover event begins at sundown on Saturday. It begins with a meal. They call the whole first portion of the day a part of preparation day, right? So when the sun goes down, you begin to eat with your family, whatever, and everything needs to be eaten by midnight, right? Okay. Then the very next day, a few hours later, begins the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So, all right. That's it for today, y'all. Yeah, he's just doing his job. Yep. Okay. All right, y'all. I'm out here. Peace.